Now I hear that these same people that failed to get me in Washington have sent every piece of information to New York so that they can try to get me there. They want to take not me, but us down. And we can never let them do that.
Well, Donald Trump is facing a significant degree of legal peril and has been for some time now. We know the district attorney of Fulton County, Georgia, opened an investigation into his attempt to bully and coerce Georgia election officials in multiple phone calls into basically inventing votes for him, right? To steal the election. Just find one more vote than I need. We also know that for the second time in just over 3 years, Trump's personal lawyer, this time it's Rudy Giuliani, last time Michael Cohen, has been raided by the FBI. That's got to be some kind of record. Federal investigators are currently in the process of sifting through everything they seized from Giuliani. And while that is happening, Rudy Giuliani's allies have been pressing Donald Trump to pay his legal fees. Then there's the state of New York, where the former president is facing multiple investigations. Now, we know that for over a year, the New York State Attorney General Letitia James has been investigating the Trump Organization. At the same time, the Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance has been conducting a criminal investigation into the former president's business practices. Early this year, his office was finally able to get a hold of the former president's financial records. And then last night, the latest development. New York Attorney General's office raised the stakes. They released this cryptic statement. It said, quote, "We have informed the Trump Organization that our investigation into the company is no longer purely civil in nature. We are now actively investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity along with the Manhattan DA. We have no additional comment at this time." Okay, the New York AG's office is teaming up with the Manhattan DA's office. Now, as far as we can tell, we can't find an instance of when this happened before to get a sense of what the comparison is. In response, Trump released a rambling, incoherent denial, but it's not clear exactly what the AG's announcement means for the Trump org. Danya Perry is both a former federal prosecutor for the Southern District of New York and a former New York State Deputy Attorney General who worked out of the very office that released that statement yesterday. David Fahrenthold, of course, is the Washington Post reporter covering the Trump family and its business interests. He was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his coverage of Donald Trump's false charity claims that ultimately led to Trump agreeing to shut down his foundation. All right, Danya, let's start with you just as someone who worked in that office. I mean, I tend to think of attorney general's offices, or I guess attorneys general offices, as largely civil investigations. So what was your reaction when you saw that? What is your understanding of the meaning and implications thereof?
I think it's a real bombshell. As you say, the sweet spot for the attorney general's office really is in complex frauds on the civil side. So this matter, as we know, has been humming along for well over a year. And it seemed that Tish James was perfectly content to meet with witnesses and interview them, review documents. And that is chugging along in parallel with a criminal investigation just a few blocks over. And something causes Tish James to say, hold up, this is a problem. I'm moving this over from the civil side of the ledger to the criminal side. So out of her typical comfort zone into a criminal investigation. So I think, from the vantage point of people who have been reviewing the evidence and speaking with the witnesses for a long time now, for them to pick up their heads and say, no, this is actually a criminal case, does tell you something about the quality and quantum of evidence that they've amassed over the past many months. I also think it's a bombshell because I think, look, this was a big move. This was flashy. And I think it really signals that she thinks not only is this a strong and, likely she believes it's a winnable criminal case, but that something's going to happen relatively soon. And I have a bunch of reasons for saying that, but amongst them, I think her civil investigation has largely got to be over.
Right. Once
you announce a criminal investigation, witnesses, of course, are going to clam up, and they're not going to be that cooperative anymore in the civil case. So I think I do think it's a major development in the case against Donald Trump.
I mean, David, you know the ins and outs of the org as well as anyone outside it, or as well as anyone who doesn't have subpoena power, something I think you would love to have and don't. What was your reaction to this?
Similar to Dania's, it's a big deal because to me it indicates that the Attorney General has not only found evidence of somebody doing something wrong, but there is an element of intent that she's found. That's one thing that we talk to people about. What does this mean to go from civil to criminal? Often the trigger in cases like this is that they've found evidence that they can tell you what somebody was thinking. Not only they did something wrong, but they knew it was wrong and they did it anyway. That doesn't mean that they found evidence that Trump knew, that Trump's the person whose intent they've divined, but it could be somebody else in his orbit. And that's a significant step. It's a much higher bar than she would normally have to prove or to meet to prove civil claims.
Dania, this is a real Law 101 question, and it's one that I actually still have a hard time with. But when we're talking about this context, what's the line between civil and criminal? The Attorney General will file civil claims against some business that defrauded millions of people, $50 million. And it's if you did that as a person, you'd be a criminal, but you're a corporation, so it's civil. I don't even get where the line is or what it says to you that it might be over that line.
I think David could teach that Law 101 class. I think it has to do with specific criminal intent. And if she's pursuing, for example, a case against Donald Trump himself, and as David said, we don't know that that's the case. Look, there's going to be, let's say, tax returns that he's signed. He's going to have any number of defenses against that, including, I had all kinds of professionals around me. I had accountants, I had lawyers advising me who I didn't know. There are built-in defenses that go around knowledge. And so you really, to meet that extra bar, you have to show not just that he knowingly signed this, but that he did so knowing it was a fraud.
Right.
So not just that he was aware he was signing a document, but did so while knowing that he inflated certain assets or deflated others.
Yeah,
so that's the extra.
That's a really useful and helpful explanation. And that gets to the question, David, for you, when you talk about the Trump orgasm entity. We're not talking about Ford Motor Company or Comcast here in terms of how big this thing is. This is it's just a handful of people.
It's a really small company, especially at the top, and it's run by people who've been around Trump a long time. It's not, as you said, it's not what you might think of as a large professional organization. It's basically a bunch of family members and other people who've been with them for 20 or 30 years. So the circle of people within the company who have been subpoenaed, who've been deposed, it's a small circle of people. It includes the president's son, Eric, the CFO of the company, Alan Weisselberg, who's he's called himself the eyes and ears of Trump's finances. It's not that many people. And so I think that's a good and a bad thing. I think if you're an investigator, there's a small number of people you need to look at, but you got to flip one of those people. You need to get this. If you want to turn somebody, you don't have infinite choices. You have kind of a small number of choices.
That's a really, really good point.